Okay, hi. I am Jessica Weiss, and I am a happiness expert. Now, usually when I tell people that, people say to me, what on earth is a happiness expert, and how do I get that job? So I will tell you how you get that job. You spend 15 years doing research. I was largely embedded in Fortune 500 companies. I spoke to thousands of people, conducted interviews and surveys, people from all walks of life, across all income levels, and we talked all about happiness. And I found some incredible truths. I learned what happiness is, how happiness works, why it's so important to our lives, and most importantly, what can we do to generate more happiness in our lives, both at work and in our regular personal life. So, through those truths that I found through all of my research, decades of research have found what we all know is already true. Happier people are higher performers. Happier people enjoy their work more. Happier people encounter less resistance, less friction, and in keeping with the topic of this talk, certainly less burnout. Okay, so how can we start to bring more happiness into our lives? What's the first thing that we should start to do? So today is all about learning about how we can generate more happiness, what we can do in our personal lives and also in our work lives. So what I want everybody to do today is to focus specifically on 3 areas. We're going to be talking about 3 primary areas of focus that I am certain that you have not heard of before. So, what are we getting wrong about happiness? Now, we all assume there's one simple playbook for happiness. We have all learned the same one since we've been kids, right? You go to school, you study hard, you get a good job, you get promoted, you earn lots of money, and then, and only then, can we be happy. But the truth is, for so many of us, that's simply not working. Right? We need to ask, what are we getting wrong about happiness? How can we think a little bit differently about happiness? And the truth is, I think, all of this emanates from this idea that I know that you have all heard before, and that is, we can choose to be happy. Right? You can wake up in the morning and you could say, today I choose to be happy. But the truth is, happiness is something much more tangible than that. It's about strategies and tools and tactics. And the research bears this out. The first study I want to talk about is a study conducted by social scientists at the University of Minnesota. It was a study of 75 identical twins. Has anybody heard of this study before? Okay, so there's some interesting facts about this study. And I also want to say, if at any point anybody has any questions or anything, please feel free to raise your hand and we can certainly start to incorporate any questions about anything that I'm talking about. Okay, getting back to our study. So 75 identical twins. They're born between the years of 1930 and 1950. Now here's the interesting fact. They were adopted and separated at birth. Okay, now, just as a quick aside, people always look at me with huge eyes. What do you mean, separated at birth? I also think this is very strange, but we are going to park that to the side for a moment. So what we have here is a researcher's gold mine. We have 75 identical twins, 150 people with the exact same genetic material, raised in an entirely different environment. So what we can really see here is what is nature and what is nurture. And what they found was fascinating. 50% of our happiness is genetic. It's predetermined. There are some people who are just born with a happier disposition. But the good news is this. The other 50% of our happiness is entirely within our control. We can do something about 50% of our happiness. So what I would like to do today is to talk about what are these 3 main areas that I want to focus on that will start to build lasting and sustainable happiness. They're not necessarily the areas that you might have assumed, but they are the areas that will start to build happiness both in your personal life and in your work life. And here they are. The 3 pillars of our happiness are connection, trust, and progress. If we can start to build happiness in these 3 areas of our lives, we can start to build overall lasting happiness for our whole life. So let's dig in on the first one, and that is connection. When I talk about connection, what I'm really talking about is friendship. And friends are magic. Now, friendship is tough. Connection is tough, whether it's in our personal lives or at work. But friends are the #1 builder of happiness, both at work and in life. So, how can we start to build connection in both our lives and our work lives? And that brings me to another fabulous study that I guarantee multiple people in this room have heard of before. And it was the longest running study that has been done on happiness. It's out of Harvard University by Dr. Robert Waldinger. Has anybody heard of this study? Okay, so it was a study of 750 men. And they were followed over 85 years. So we really got a fabulous picture of what is going on in happiness, whether we're in college, what happens after college, and when you get married and develop a life, and in older age. So what's fascinating about this study is that it was actually 2 studies. The first study was following privileged men at Harvard University. Ironically, one of the people in that study was President John F. Kennedy. And the other study that was going on independently, nobody even knew that these 2 studies were happening. The other study that was going on was actually out of the law school, and that one was studying underprivileged youth in Boston's worst neighborhoods. So at a certain point, the 2 studies converged, and we started to see what was actually going on, whether it was about privileged, whether it was about underprivileged, what is the key to happiness? And what they found is the happiest, healthiest people, physically healthy, mentally happy, are relationships, relationships, relationships. It's all about connections. It's all about friendship. Every available study tells us friendship is the #1 driver of happiness, whether it's in life or at work. Now that's just one study. Let's talk about the next one, and I got my clicker to work. Okay, so the next one is, has anybody here heard of the Blue Zones? Has anybody watched this show on Netflix? Okay, so for those who haven't, the Blue Zones are places on the earth where people live to 100 and beyond. And it's not only about living to 100, it's about living a full life and a flourishing life. So there are 5 of those. So the researcher then started to dig in on, okay, what does it mean to be flourishing? What is this idea of happiness? And he found happiness blue zones. Happiness hotspots on the earth where people who live there live with higher levels of happiness. And there are 4 of them: Singapore, Denmark, Boulder, Colorado, and Costa Rica. Okay, very interesting, divergent places. Singapore is certainly the standout there. But if anybody has any questions, you can certainly ask me about that later. We are going to dig in on Denmark for a minute. Okay. So here's a list of the happiest countries in the world. Let's talk a little bit about Denmark. So Denmark is a country where people work 33 hours a week. Now, I don't know about you, but 33 hours generally puts me at about Tuesday afternoon. But ironically, Denmark is actually one of the most productive countries in Europe. And what's interesting about this is by working 33 hours a week, what we see here is that there's more time for connection. There's more time for friendship. So if Denmark is one of the happiest countries in the world, what we see here is that they are prioritizing friendship and connection. Okay, how are they doing this? Denmark is a country of clubs. People belong to clubs, multiple clubs. It can be anything from rollerblading to football to knitting. Whatever it is, they leave work after their 33-hour work week, which we can all be jealous of, and they go and they connect with other human beings. So what we see is, in Denmark, when you prioritize friendship and connection, this is a key to happiness. Now, there's a really funny saying that I heard. They said, when 2 Danes meet, they shake hands. When 3 Danes get together, they form a club. So I want to introduce everybody to Helen. This is a really fascinating story. So Helen is a woman who lived in the UK. She was an editor of a very fancy fashion magazine, Marie Claire, and she lived like a super glamorous life in London, right? What we all imagine it to be, the Sex and the City lifestyle, right? Everything that we all aspire to. Maybe not the men in the room, but the women in the room certainly know what I'm talking about. So Helen enjoyed her job, she enjoyed her life. She was super busy though. She didn't necessarily always get a chance to do the things that she wanted to do, but you know, we kind of, and we all live this way too, we just assume that that's kind of the way that things go. So one Wednesday afternoon, Helen's phone rings and it's her husband. And he says, Helen, I got my dream job. It happened, I know. I can't believe it, it actually happened. So Helen's listening. He says, okay, here's the catch, because you know there's always a catch, right? Here's the catch. It's for Lego, the job that I wanted. It's in Denmark. And she's like, Denmark? Copenhagen? No, not Copenhagen. Rural Denmark. Now Helen is a bit flabbergasted. Not only is she about to uplift her life and change everything, she can't even find Denmark on a map. Right? So here's where Helen's thinking went. She's like, okay, I'm not going to make this permanent. I can't take away the happiness from my husband. I'm going to take a leave of absence. We're going to pack up our life. I'm going to ship everything across the North Sea, and we're going to see how this goes. So Helen moved to Denmark, to rural Denmark. And for Helen, the recipe for happiness was really quite simple. Helen found that all that she really needed was time with friends, time for peace and creativity, and time to do the things that she loved. So Helen joined the requisite 3 clubs. Helen found her people, and surprise, surprise, Helen never moved back to the UK. She found a level of happiness that she didn't even know to be true. So here we go. Prioritizing connection and friendship is a key to happiness. So there is something about these happiness blue zones that we can all learn. And what's interesting is each of these countries approaches happiness from a different angle. But the thing that we know is for sure true is that happiness is not about money and it's not about success, but it certainly is about connection and friendship. Okay, now you're all saying to me, this is a burnout conference. Why is she telling me about Helen in Denmark? How does this apply to workplace happiness? And I'm going to tell you right now. So it turns out that everything that applies to personal happiness applies to workplace happiness. Not surprising, right? So a well-connected team is going to collaborate more, is going to be more creative. A well-connected team that trusts each other is going to be able to take more risks. A well-connected team that works together to make progress towards something meaningful actually has more happiness on a daily basis. So let's dig in a little bit on how this workplace happiness applies to us here in America, where we are not working 33 hours a week. So it turns out, back to that study, that Harvard study, in addition to saying that it's all about relationships, 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 what they also found in this study, which was super interesting, is that not only do we need friendships, but we need friendships from a wide variety of sources. We need a diverse set of friends, and that applies to workplace friends, right? We need friends at work. Now, so often people think that friends are friends and work is work. But the truth of the matter is that we need to establish friends at work. People who feel connected at work are 34% more likely to accomplish their goals. That's from this idea that you have a friend at work. 34% more likely. You're 92% more likely to achieve personal growth. So this idea that you're well connected, that you feel that you are having an impact, that showing up every day actually matters, begins to actually impact the work that you're doing. But here's the interesting fact. According to Gallup, only 20% of us have a friend at work. So for everybody here who's thinking, oh my God, I don't have a friend at work. Well, only 1 in 5 people actually have a friend at work. So this is the number one question I get, no matter what I'm talking about, because I always talk about friends because it's a huge driver of happiness, is, okay, great, we get it. Friends are important to happiness, but I'm an adult. How do I do this? How do I actually start to make friends? How can I make friends at work? And the research here is brilliant. You are going to love it. Okay, here's the first one. Psychological research tells us that friendship is not based on this idea that we have to have shared interests. It's not based on this idea that we have to have common values. What friendship is based on is this mere exposure effect. What do I mean by that? So, we tend to like people the more we see them. Quite literally, that is all it is. Consistently seeing the same people on a regular basis will make you like them more, will make them like you more. Okay, so let me explain this. Let me put it into practice, a story from my own life. So I love to do yoga. I do hot yoga. I do yoga like 5 times a week. I'm a little kind of crazy because exercise is also really good for happiness, but that's a separate conversation. So I do yoga about 5 times a week. And not only do I love to do yoga, but I'm a little kind of, how should we say, OCD about where I stand in the room. Okay? There's always a place that I want to stand. Now, there's a whole bunch of reasons why I like this place, but I'm going to call it my spot. It's in the front row, left-hand side. It's kind of like a catty corner, so I don't have anybody on this side of me, which makes me happy because I don't get any bodily fluids, and I just have someone over here. Now, I take the same exact spot every time I go to yoga. In fact, I leave the house early to ensure that I get my spot. Okay, so what I started to notice after a while is I'm not the only crazy person. Lots of other people also have their spots, right? And slowly what started to happen is I would see the same people in the same general areas, and we kind of like start to smile, like a head nod, nothing serious. But conversations slowly started to develop, and it's back to this mere exposure effect. By simply seeing the same people time and time again, we started to have coffee together. Now we go to brunch together. What happened is, merely from having my spot in yoga, I now have a whole new set of friends from this mere exposure effect. So, friendship, not necessarily about common interests, not necessarily about shared values, although I am certain that all of that can help too. But the research here is so brilliant. It's just this idea that you need to be exposed to the same people time and time again. Okay, here's the next one. This next one is awesome. Okay, so the mere exposure effect is absolutely magical, right? It's this idea that all we need to do is see the same people on a regular basis. They're going to start to like us more. Friendships are going to start to ensue merely from this consistency. Likability gap is the next one. So, workplace friendships is going to require us to start to talk to people that we don't really know very well, right? That's part of making friends at work. And sometimes that feels kind of awkward and uncomfortable, and I'm the first one to say, I don't like that either, but it's going to require us to step a little bit outside of our comfort zone, right? So what I want you to do here is talk to strangers. Now, that's exactly opposite of the advice that we were all given as children, but let me explain. What I want you to do, and this is not about starting a weird conversation in the elevator or in the cafeteria. There's natural opportunities for this to happen, but I want you to talk to strangers. Okay, so how does this play out? What does this look like? Here is the likability gap, and it will shift your perspective completely on what it means to talk to new people. So when I talk to somebody new, in my mind, I'm saying to myself, oh my God, she's definitely gonna think I'm really weird. Why am I talking to her? Maybe I shouldn't be doing this. But what the likability gap tells us is, no, people love to be spoken to. You think that they're not gonna like it, but you are going in there being like, oh my God, this is so awkward. The other person is thinking, this is amazing, she's talking to me. I'm loving this. There is a likability gap that exists. We think everybody's not gonna like us, and they're like, oh, awesome, I really like her. So this is an entire shift on how you view talking to strangers. So if you are in a situation where a natural opportunity comes up for you to have conversation, what I want everybody to remember is that every single human being has this likability gap. So you can have an entirely fresh perspective on talking to strangers. Now, let me put this into action for you, and I'm going to give you one more tip that is going to be game-changing. Not only do I want you to talk to strangers, I want you to do one more thing. So, imagine this scenario. You see someone new. I would say introduce yourself if necessary. But even more than that, an absolute guarantee to put the likability gap into action is to pay someone a compliment. A compliment about anything. This is one that works for me every single time. If there is a woman who is wearing a fabulous outfit, I will say, I love your dress. She will say to me, it has pockets, and it was on sale. Now, all the women get that, but what I am trying to say is, not only does this likability gap exist, but if you pay someone a compliment, that sort of dials up and puts it on steroids, so to speak. So, when we're talking about workplace friendship, right, because I said one of the key drivers to happiness is connection and friendship. When we're talking about workplace friendship, I want you to remember two things. The first one was this mere exposure effect, and that is about becoming a regular, just being consistently in the same place time and time again. So what does that look like at work? Maybe it's taking lunch at the same time. Maybe it's attending the same weekly meetings. And I want you all to have your spot. So sit in the same spot. Sit in the same spot at the lunchroom. Sit in the same spot at the cafeteria. This sounds really simple, but what we're doing is we're putting the mere exposure effect into action. And the second one is this likability gap, which is really like a wonderful mind game, right? It's a whole shift on our perspective that not only do strangers not want us to talk to them, they do want us to talk to them, and they're going to like us so much more than we ever thought possible. Okay. The first one was connection. The second one is trust. Now, I feel like we've heard this one many times before. We all know that teams that have a high level of trust are more high performing. Teams that have a high level of trust produce better work. Teams that have a high level of trust are more innovative and more creative. Everybody has heard this before, right? But the challenge with trust, and we all know what it feels like to be in a relationship with trust or on a team with trust. It's just like intuitively, you know how great that feels. But the challenge with trust is, how do you build it? How do you earn it? How do you create? What's the playbook to have trust across a team, right? Now, trust is the cornerstone of team dynamics. So how do we actually start to build trust on teams? And that one brings us to this idea of okay, we're going premature. Sorry, hang on. Nobody saw that. Okay, so how do we start to build trust on our teams? It comes down to this very basic idea of psychological safety. Who here has heard of psychological safety? Okay, awesome. So for those people who haven't heard of it, psychological safety is this phenomena that happens on teams where there is an environment where everybody feels safe to express their ideas. Everybody feels safe to say their opinions. There's no threat of judgment. There's no threats of retribution. And what happens on these psychologically safe teams is that there is increased collaboration. There's increased performance. There's increased innovation. So how do we actually make psychological safety a reality? It's a great thing, it's a great buzzword, but how do you actually make it a reality? And that brings me to this story. This is the Four Seasons, personally one of my favorite brands, and the Four Seasons has actually instituted an amazing process that everybody here can bring back to their teams for instituting psychological safety. Okay, so what does this look like? Every day at the Four Seasons, they have a daily meeting. The GM runs the daily meeting. Every single department is present at these daily meetings. So it's everybody from the GM to the head of housekeeping to the head of the concierge and the reservations. You understand what I'm trying to say. Everybody's present at this meeting. So one aspect of this meeting, one thing that happens at these daily meetings is called the glitch report. Okay, so what is the glitch report? Everybody comes to these meetings. Every single person comes to the meeting with a mistake that happened the day before. They come with the mistake, what was the learning from the mistake, and what was the action taken going forward to fix the mistake. This is everybody in the meeting, from the GM to the housekeeper. So it can be that a guest didn't receive turn-down service. It can be something as minor as somebody got the wrong drink. And it could be something as major as we entirely missed a reservation and this person didn't have a place to stay. The point is, what the glitch report does is that it creates this idea of psychological safety. Every single person in the room is coming in with their mistake. Nobody is judging anybody for something going wrong because apparently everything goes wrong for everybody at all times. So what this does is it encourages transparency across the entire organization. There's a focus on learning and improvement, timely and constructive feedback, inclusive participation, and positive reinforcement. What's even better about the glitch report is these GMs from different properties actually get together and they do their own glitch reports so that across properties, Four Seasons can start to raise their level of customer service. Now, I did want to stop on this one. Isadore Sharp is the CEO of the Four Seasons, and I love this quote. What's important with a glitch is not the error, right? It's not the mistake, because we all know that everybody's making the mistakes. It's the recovery. It's how we fix the mistake. So this glitch report meeting is a brilliant way to bring psychological safety into the team. And this is something that everybody here can do with their teams. You can call it the glitch report. I read somewhere else that someone else is calling these kinds of meetings the oops meeting, right? It's where things went wrong. But this is how you do it. It's super easy. It is super simple, but it is so effective for building trust on your teams. It's a weekly meeting. Everybody comes with one mistake to share, their lesson learned, and the action taken. Super, super simple. Quite honestly, everything that I'm probably going to tell you today, there's nothing particularly complicated about any of it, but it's a little bit counterintuitive. If you want to build psychological safety on your teams, if you want to have a team that is trusted and connected, that is collaborated and working together, institute the glitch report so that you can start to have more psychological safety on your teams. Okay, before I move to our third pillar, I wanted to stop to see if there were any questions. Yes?
Earlier in one of the presentations, they were talking about reporting others for making mistakes. Then there being a backlash or them being accused of being racist or discriminatory or what have you. So that isn't happening as often as it should. So what would your recommendation be for someone who wants to be able to say, oh, so-and-so made a mistake, let's talk about that, and not be targeted themselves?
Yeah, okay, that's a great point. And I think what's going on with the glitch report is a little bit different than that kind of situation. That one feels a little bit, while there's a need to recognize mistakes and there's a need for accountability, that one feels, this is just me, slightly accusatory. What I love about the glitch report is this idea that it's everybody in the room taking accountability together and cumulatively. So maybe so if you're in a position where you see someone else has made a mistake, what do? I think that the easiest way to kind of start to institute psychological safety is to somehow make that a group mistake. This isn't about pointing fingers at somebody. The whole point of psychological safety is we all make mistakes and we're not going to be judged for it. So if there's some way if the thinking behind it becomes, how do we make this a cumulative mistake? How do we all bear this kind of responsibility rather than, Joe Schmo, he did something bad? That's actually going to be completely counterintuitive. But there's a way to work that in so that we can all have like group learnings around it and start to institute the psychological safety. Does that answer the question? Yeah. Okay, great. Any other questions? Does anybody do anything like these glitch reports in the meetings that they have right now? Yeah.
What do you do if a stranger takes your spot?
Oh my God.
You have to talk to a stranger?
It's a big problem. So you first got to pay them a compliment. You got to tell them that you like their dress. No, okay, so what do you do? Well, then you tell them, listen, you're in my spot, but I'll let it go for today, and tell me your name, and we need to start to be friends. That's how that goes. Any other questions? Yes? Yeah. Okay, so that is a little bit different than what we're talking about when it comes to the glitch report. So that is going to kind of start to veer into a different situation where we're going to talk about accountability, and we're going to talk about how we deal with accountability and how we deal with people who aren't being accountable for their responsibilities. And I have actually a great story about this one too, and I'll just slightly touch on it. So it's a story about a principal at in Walla Walla, Washington. Okay, so he came to the school, and the school was like in dire straits. The students, everybody was being suspended. Everybody was like, it was disciplinary actions from everywhere that you can imagine. Nobody was graduating. It was a disaster. So Principal Jim came in, and he came in with these very like traditional ideas around accountability. You break the rules, you get suspended, you get expelled, very kind of hardcore ideas. And it was time and time again the same students who were getting in trouble, getting expelled. Not surprising, right? So he realized that this like hardcore approach wasn't working. It wasn't going to bring anybody up along the way. And this goes back to what I was talking about earlier, and it's around this idea of connecting with people. So what he realized is, instead of going after a hard approach, let's actually talk about how we can see each student as an individual, how we can understand what the stressors are that are going on in their lives, that this is how they have to behave in school. He took a much softer approach and genuinely connected with each and every student. So if you are in a position where somebody on the team is continually making mistakes and is not being accountable, I would say go with a soft approach first. I'm not saying this works in every single situation because we know it doesn't, but at least acknowledging and letting that person feel seen, because usually there is something going on. People don't want to do a bad job, right? People want to do a good job. So that would be my learning there. Principal Jim, Walla Walla, Washington, go for a soft approach. Needless to say, he instituted this soft approach. Everybody now graduates. Nobody is doing bad things. There aren't gang fights. It's like it's a story for another time. Okay, any other questions? Okay, awesome. We will get to our third pillar. And the third pillar is this idea of progress. Now, what do I mean by progress? What I'm talking about when I'm talking about progress is this idea that we're doing meaningful work. Right? We're doing meaningful work, and not only are we doing meaningful work, we are feeling a sense of progress and accomplishment along the way. The number one driver, listen to this, this is a good one, it's a good nugget. The number one driver to happiness on a daily basis, so when you come into work, the number one thing that is going to make you feel happy at work is this idea that you are making progress towards something meaningful. This idea of progress will take a bad day and make it a good day. If you feel that you are making progress, it'll take a good day and it will make it a great day. So what am I talking about when I'm talking about progress? You can all guess. I'm not talking about these huge grand gestures. I'm not talking about huge, amazing goals. I am talking about small wins. Small, steady wins along the way, which will lead to huge, amazing, beautiful goals. Okay, I'm going to share with you a story from my own life. Okay, so before I did this kind of work, I mentioned earlier, I was a management consultant, and I worked with lots of Fortune 500 companies. And we would do all kinds of different projects. We would do organizational design projects, and we would do specific innovation projects, and we would do projects around teaching companies how they could be more creative and more innovative. And this project that I'm going to talk about was a fascinating one. So it was for Pepsi. It was in India, and the brief for the project, or the to-do for the project, was come up with new snack ideas for the India market. Okay, that sounds hugely exciting, right? Snacks, how hard could that be? We all love chips. Well, India is Lay's largest market, and Lay's is the #1 chip maker in India. So the pressure was intense. This was not some one-off project. There were millions and millions of dollars on the line. So imagine this. We're all sitting in a room and we are surrounded by bags of chips, because when you do these kinds of projects, you always need stimulation to get your creative juices going. You want to have real products that you can taste and touch. So here's some of the chips that were in the room. So the flavors were amazing. We loved it. Magic masala, Spanish tomato tango, chili limon, hot and sweet chili. I mean, some of these sound amazing. There was even a chai flavored chip, okay? So it was awesome. The chip part of the whole project was fabulous, except we were kind of overwhelmed. We were told you could go in any direction that you want. You can come up with a new chip flavor. You can come up with a new product. You can come up with new packaging. We don't care what it is. Just give us something new for this market. Okay, well, we were paralyzed. The team could not move. We basically felt like we were in quicksand. The pressure was overwhelming and intense. Everybody was frustrated. And let me tell you something. From the happiness expert, happiness levels on that team were quite low. Right? Everybody wanted to kill each other. Has anybody been in this situation where you've all been frustrated on a team situation? Anybody been there? Okay. So what happened next, what we quite honestly stumbled upon, was game changing. I know here that everybody has heard of a to-do list, right? So something we all talk about, the to-do list. Well, what we did, and we did not do this on purpose, but it kind of happened by accident, is we took the idea of a to-do list and we turned it on its head. So we took the idea of a to-do list and we changed it to a done list. What am I talking about? Let me tell you what this looked like. So what we did was we took every single thing that we had to do, we put it on Post-it notes, little Post-it notes, and we plastered the entire wall in the back of the room with the Post-it notes. Okay, and what we did was we called that a done list. Now, I know, you're like, how could unfinished tasks possibly be a done list? But stick with me for a second. Every time that we completed something, we would move that little pastel square from the to-do side of the room to the done side of the room. Okay, so what started to happen was with every single task that we completed, the energy in the room entirely shifted. The momentum started to feed on itself, right? We could start to see the progress right there on the wall. It was almost like a physical monument of our success. So instead of feeling frustrated, instead of kind of dreading every single brainstorm that we had to get to, we actually started to build on each other's idea. Everybody started to have more confidence. Everybody started to have more energy. So from this very simple idea of taking a to-do list and making a done list, we were able to change the entire perspective of the team. So this is really not about a done list, clearly, right? What I'm trying to say is this is really about figuring out a way to unleash the potential on your teams, right? All of that was there. Merely making a done list did not put things into action. What it did was it cleared the way for people to start to feel that sense of progress, that sense of accomplishment. First it was individual, and then it went across the entire team. So, we did the to-do list, we did the done list, we actually came up with some fabulous flavors, and the entire project was a success. But even more important was how that team felt, and that when we came back from India, the trust, the connection, and that sense of progress was game-changing for our team. Our team now had a whole new level of happiness and sustained contentment from our work, all from tapping into this idea of progress and accomplishment. Now, I am not attempting to be Pollyanna, that word always gets me, Pollyanna here, right? I'm not one of these happiness experts who comes in and is going to tell you every single thing is going to be rosy and it's all going to be perfect, because Lord knows it is not. So what I want to do, in addition to kind of giving you some tools about maintaining this level of progress and sense of accomplishment, is also acknowledge that sometimes things don't always go the way that we want them to, right? Things are not generally as straightforward as we want them to. And this brings me to a really brilliant idea from Dale Carnegie. Dale Carnegie of the How to Win Friends and Influence People. Everybody know that book? Anybody read the book? Okay, so it's a pretty old book. It's actually from the 1930s. So nothing I'm going to say here is going to be particularly modern or new, but it is incredibly effective. Okay, here it is. And this is why I have this image up. Dale Carnegie says this: we need to live our life in day-tight compartments. Okay, what am I talking about here? This is an analogy from the world of ocean liners, okay? So in one of these really big ships, the captain has a button he can press. So if there's somewhere in the ship that springs a leak, if there's somewhere in the ship that something's happening, a fire, whatever it is, he has the ability to press this button and these huge metal doors come down. That area that has the problem becomes completely sealed off. It becomes watertight, right? So this idea that Dale Carnegie is talking about, living your life in day-tight compartments. The ship now becomes impossible to sink, right? They've sealed off the problem and the ship can continue on its way. Okay, how does this relate back to your life? So, if you are ever in a position where you spring a leak, you have a worry, you have an anxiety, you have negative thoughts, what I want you to do is press the button. Bring down the metal door, contain that leak, contain that worry, that anxiety, whatever it is, to that one piece of your brain, but don't let the ship sink. Keep going, keep moving forward. And that is from Dale Carnegie. It works brilliantly for negative thoughts. I highly suggest you give that one a shot. Okay, before I go on, I want to stop. If there are any questions about progress, about sense of accomplishment. Okay, good, because I have one more thing that I want to talk about, and it is this one. It is the Joy Journal. This goes along the same idea of this sense of accomplishment. How can we continue feeling that sense of progress? Now, I know that lots of people keep journals, and you're probably rolling your eyes and saying, oh my God, another journal. This is not another journal, and you can add this on to whatever journal that you are already doing. But this is a happiness journal. Okay, so what I want you to do is at the end of each day, write down 3 things that brought you joy and why. It can be anything. It can be the fantastic sandwich that you had for lunch. It can be the fabulous speaker that you heard at your conference. It can be the meeting that got canceled. Tell me that doesn't bring you joy. So that any of those things can go into the Joy Journal. And why I love this is it is a brilliant tool for kind of quietly shifting your mindset. I'm not really a very big positive mindset person, but I do acknowledge that we need to live in a very optimistic way. So what this does, what the Joy Journal does, is it basically allows you to go out into the world and scan for joy, because you know that you need to write down 3 things that brought you joy that day and why. So you are now going to go through your day trying to find the joyful moments, whether it was a fabulous cup of coffee or a meeting that you had with a friend, but you are now looking for the joy all day long. So that is why I love the Joy Journal. It increases happiness, it reduces depression, it enhances optimism, it improves relationships, and it gives you greater resilience. This is from science from Dr. Martin Seligman. Okay, I am at the end of my time, so I'm going to talk really fast. Here is a quick summary. If you want to build more happiness in your life, both personally and at work, what I want you to do is focus on these 3 areas. We're not talking about happiness as a choice. We're talking about tangible, tactical tools. I want you to build connection at work and in life so that your teams are connected and collaborating. I want you to build trust, psychological safety. I want you all to do the glitch report or an oops meeting so that everybody feels comfortable sharing their mistakes and learning from their mistakes. And the last one is this idea about a sense of progress. So everybody's going to think about me in India with the chips and the to-do list and the done list, but you can all do the done list yourself. It's just this idea of unlocking the potential in your teams, and you are going to bring down the metal doors because Lord knows crap happens, and you are going to write in your Joy Journal, and everybody here is going to have more happiness in their lives. So I hope that these tips are just the beginning of your happiness journey. I hope these tools and strategies and tactics are all something that you can start to institute in your life, but I hope that you all start to go out and live your life with more happiness. So let's go. Let's do it. Thank you.